I'll be the last one standing. 2 hands in the air, I'm a champion. You'll be looking up at me when it's over. I live for the
It's Pixie Paula, and you are tuning into Spiritually Speaking with Pixie Paula, and we are on episode number 16. Can you believe it? It's flown by so quickly. I can't even realize that that could possibly mean that over 4 months has gone by. And typically I'm telling you that where's Pixie now? And I'm usually in my home office in Charleston, South Carolina. But today, you could probably tell by the background that I am actually in a hospital in Florida, and for privacy purposes, I won't talk about where. But you can tell by my visitor pass and the background here that I snuck off into the hospital cafeteria to try to be able to do the podcast today. So, moving right through, as us strong women do, I am delighted to be able to introduce you to one of my dearest longtime friends, Miss Karen Eckes,
Hey, Paula.
who's joining us today, also from, and you can tell them where you are.
I am in Palm Harbor, Florida, which is usually, we're sunny today, but we're a little chilly. So, yes, but I am joining you from Florida as well.
Yeah, what is going on with the Florida weather the last 2 days? It was like 37 degrees when I went to bed last night. The house was like 63 inside the house when I woke up. 2 days ago, I was trying to cool it down past 77.
I know. We're having winter a little early, I think. Exactly.
Well, I hope it doesn't last.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for helping me through the last couple of weeks and the last couple of years. And I am so glad that we are besties because you are remarkable. I can't wait to let everybody hear about all that you have done and all that you share. And I do want to spend some time a little bit about that because I want my guests to at least know a little bit about who you are, what you do, where you are in your life. And then we'll talk about what's going on with us as women who have had to experience the aging of our moms and the transitioning of our moms into wherever their next journeys take them. But before we talk about that, let's talk a little bit about you, your career, your passions, what you're working on, because you're just one of the most fascinating people I know.
Thank you. So what am I working on? Well, I've had a lot of different careers and different businesses in my life. And I've enjoyed, and I love I think my biggest passion is creating things, right? So I kind of had that cognition as I created different businesses and different things during my life. It's the create that I love. And I think that really comes from just being an artist. And that was always my first passion and my truest passion. And actually during COVID, during the lockdown, I went back to that passion. And I decided that life's too short and I didn't want to waste time doing things that weren't my true passion, just basically. So I went back to painting and created a new art studio, and I've been doing that ever since. And I have to say that it felt really good to go back to the thing that I feel is kind of like my superpower. Like I can do different things and I can be good at different things, but that's the one thing that I have real certainty on. And it's been a joy to work on that. And, as you were kind of alluding to, the last, several years have been super difficult in society and for me personally. So being able to have that that one thing that I love to do and I feel good about has kind of grounded me and anchored me and gotten me through. And that's what I'm working on now today as a business. So, yeah.
It's so important what you're saying. Like you need to have some kind of outlet or creative outlet to be able to, funnel your your life stream and you're still your life force when it seems like your very life is being taken away from you. I am so lucky. I mean, I've been in your studio in New York, and now
Mm.
I've had the privilege of just being in your studio in Florida, which is absolutely
Mm.
amazing. So, the art, I mean, it speaks to you and it's your creative outlet. But I got to tell you, I was so inspired just looking at your pieces. So, for me, it brings out the things that speak to me too. And I guess that's the beauty about art is that the observer, right, it becomes their own and their own interpretation. And I guess that's why like some pieces speak to somebody and something speaks to somebody else differently. And even all of your pieces are also unique and different. How,
You
how
know,
like how?
and that's funny that you say that because I just get ideas from anywhere. Like one time I saw this tangerine color and I was obsessed with using that in a painting or a shape or some clothing that somebody's wearing. Like it literally can be inspired by anything. And that I do feel like I have so many different things that I like that it translates into all kinds of, like you said, different kinds of paintings. I do contemporary art, but it's all kinds of different contemporary art. And some artists, you look at their art and you say, oh, it's a super theme, and you know them right away because they paint kind of the same thing or this in the same way, and they have an identifiable thing. And I worried about that. Like as an artist, I'm like, well, mine are so diverse. My paintings aren't the same. Is that a good or bad thing? But I just embrace it, and I'm going with it because I paint what I feel, and I have an idea and I want to put that idea down, and it is what it is, and it does make me feel great, and it does make me feel really good when people connect with something that I've done. And I think having a broad range of ideas and paintings allows me to connect with more people. It's not one particular way that I might do it, but and it's true because people that see my art are drawn to different ones. Like they'll come in and go, oh, I really like that one. And they may not like that one, but they like that one. And not everybody likes the same thing, which to me is fascinating as the people that, the persons that's creating that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I know I was in with your son and I was like, oh my God, I love this. And he's like, oh, that one doesn't speak to me. I like this one over here. And I'm like, oh, I like this one over here.
Yeah.
And I love your different mediums. I like, for me, again, here's what's different for me. Like when you use multiple, I don't know how to say this the right way, mediums, right? Where there's texture in the
Right.
painting, or you're introducing, rocks or some inspiration from other gemstones, or it's the paint is piled up on top of each other, and so you feel like you're going into this cavern. Or I love
Yeah.
the texture ones.
I do too. Texture to me is everything. I love to create like layers and textures and use different things. I don't really paint with brushes. I paint with spatulas and all kinds of things, like all kinds of items to create like this texture. It's not like a paintbrush usually. So I do love the texture. I love to create something interesting. Like you're saying, I like to use glass, ground glass,
What's the most unique? Could you hear that?
Yes.
You guys hear the background? Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's
Hey,
okay.
we're doing what we're doing here.
It's
Um,
live.
it's live. What so what's the most unique medium do you think you've done or used?
um, I mean, I've used paper that I've like kind of saturated and kind of made like a 3D raised, um, kind of like a little mountain thing on a wood piece that was actually done in paper that was covered in metallic dust. So that was, interesting. I mean, I've used glass because in a previous life, years ago, I was a glass artist. So glass is a medium that I really appreciate, so
Yes.
I've ground up glass and I've sprinkled in glass pieces. So that I find to be interesting. And that gives it paintings a whole different level of interest. So, I'm willing to use whatever. Those are just some of the things, but I look forward to like being inspired to use all kinds of like found items that I find to put into the work. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the stained glass too. I forgot about the glass work. Now I remember.
Yes.
Oh, you're just so amazing. Okay, so then I know you had time in the music industry, you've had time in the wellness industry, you've had time in the
Yeah.
spiritual industry. How
Yeah.
do those all kind of come to? I'm sure they're all somehow connected with creativity, right?
Well, like I said, I think the thing that drove me to be involved in all of that was creating something out of nothing. I've kind of thought about a lot about that over the years. And I realized if I were to drill everything down, that's the basic thing. It's the joy of taking something that wasn't there and putting it there, making something exist. So, like you said, that could have been all these different things, right? A glass studio, wellness company. Really, I find that all of those are creative, in a different way. And I get to help people with those things in different ways. There are different ways to communicate with people or to bring them joy or to help them make their life better, increase the quality of their life in a way. Art does that, wellness does that, they're all connected in that way. So I think going back to art kind of rounds it all back up to me. All those things get rounded back up and I'm back to kind of the basic in a way, but I think that path has led me to being where I am today. So, yeah.
Yeah. Now, so you recently moved from New York to Florida. Were you born in New York?
No. My dad was in the Navy. So I was born in Maine. And then when I was 5, my parents moved to California. And I lived there for 5 years. And then I moved back to New York. I spent most of my life in New York, so it's kind of my home base. When I was old enough to move away after college, I've lived in a variety of other places, including Florida, North Carolina, Texas, Haiti,
Oh, wow.
all kinds of places. But New York was always the home base, and so leaving there to move to Florida was kind of a big deal. We moved out when I moved to Florida with my mom. We moved out of the family home that had been in the family for 80 years. So it was a big deal to leave and come here. Yeah.
Yes. And so that brings us to like why we're in Florida here. And I haven't really talked about this with anybody yet, but I'm here because my mom moved from Connecticut to Florida about close to 20 years ago now. And she's lived here through her retirement. And she recently got diagnosed with ovarian cancer and went in for an emergency surgery that was like doop, doop, doop. I mean, quick, quick, quick. Diagnosed and said, this has to come out right away. It was a pretty large mass. So she had that and then had some complications after surgery, recovered, went to a nursing home for a couple of weeks where she was, as we're finding out now, really neglected and developed C. diff. She had been complaining and complaining about bad pain in her stomach and mucus and diarrhea. And she was not taken very seriously until the point where she collapsed and ended up in an emergency situation where she had to have a complete colostomy and ileostomy. And that was the only thing that could save her life. And unfortunately, we were in a very tiny hospital that didn't have the proper resources that maybe a larger hospital would have had. So we've been having one health challenge after another, trying to keep her alive. And this has been now almost 2 weeks, actually, this weekend will be 2 weeks that we have just been in intensive care by her side, for until we couldn't stand any longer. Every single day, just hoping to get her out of the woods. And I am so gratefully blessed to be able to say that today she is still holding her own. She's not quite out of ICU, but she has gone from a death sentence and last rites to slowly progressing enough to prove everybody wrong and wake up and have a few days of just being at least eyes open to becoming more alert and having coming off of a ventilator. And then just about an hour ago, she came off of her feeding tube. And they're going to try tomorrow to give her some clear liquids to see if she's able to tolerate that, which is just an amazing, progress for her. At 80 years old, she's so tired and she has fought through so much. So we're hopeful. I don't know at this point that we'll ever be out of the woods. And unfortunately, once you get into, I call it now the system, seems like one health thing after another goes wrong, things that have absolutely nothing to do with the cancer in the first place. And so I don't know that she'll ever be strong enough at this point to be able to resume the cancer treatment that they had offered to her. And it's still a day by day experience of what's going to happen next. You know this all too well. So I don't know if you want to share a little bit about your experience.
Sure. Yeah. I totally understand what you're going through because just literally over a year ago, I went through a very similar situation with my mom. As I said before, we left New York and we arrived in Florida June 1st, 2021. And that was a big move for us. We were moving because my mother had several different health, like you're saying, health issues, one after another. Every year, it seemed like she had something that happened to her, an injury or some major thing that went on. And she was, I lived with her and I took care of her. So I was there to help her. And I could see life becoming more difficult for her. And the house we lived in had a big staircase. You had to go up and down this steep staircase every day. It was difficult to navigate. And the last injury she had, she basically had to live in the living room for several months. It was during COVID. She actually broke her pelvis, fell. She was in the hospital one day and they sent her home because of COVID in New York. And I had to take care of her, which I felt totally unequipped to do, but we managed, and it was a horrible situation. So as she came out of that, we realized that house wasn't good. So we decided to make a move to Florida while she could still do it under her own steam and get a better house that would, be good for all of us and just have a better place for us. So we did that, and we arrived in June. We bought a house in July. We closed on a new house. And at that, literally a week later, she was in the hospital, like you're saying, very suddenly, had emergency surgeries and had 2 enormous bladder stones taken out and a big tumor in her bladder, and was diagnosed with aggressive bladder cancer. She had ongoing issues before we left New York. They kept saying she had a bladder infection. They didn't catch it. They didn't diagnose it till we got here. And it was devastating. It was just devastating after, we finally found our place. And, then she was so sick. And it was, I totally feel for you because I understand how traumatic it is when your mom, is in such a position and you're the daughter, and being the daughter with the mom, it's so. Hold on. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I think. Yeah, no, I know. Not your mom. But yeah, it was a trauma. And, it was it was a traumatic thing. The timing for me was extra difficult because I was literally moving into this huge new house we had built. Exactly. Literally, they're trying to kick her out of the hospital, and I have moving trucks arriving from New York that I'm by myself here trying to help the movers. So it was a crazy logistical nightmare. And it's just traumatic to hear this news about your mom, and she came out of the hospital, came home, and she was, like you're saying, it was such a traumatic surgery at her age that we knew she wouldn't be, life wouldn't be quite normal or wouldn't be the same as it was. And she was unable to undergo the cancer treatment because she was in such a fragile state that she couldn't really even move. And we could see that very quickly there wasn't much we could do. And she was deteriorating very fast. So, I called my kids, her sister came, the family came down, and we decided to hospice her in the house and take care of her, which we did. So that's, the route that we chose to go. But I think, it's so difficult when these things happen to us so suddenly. These kinds of things happen with parents. And I've had other, obviously grandparents and my dad and all kinds of things happen in the past. But having it happen to my mom was a whole different level of confront, and it was
Yes.
it was harder than anything else. And I think it is that mother-daughter dynamic, and I think that you become the parent, you truly taking care of your own parent, and going into that role and all the things that encompasses and what that makes us do as human beings, the things that we have to go through in order to step into that role. It was quite an experience. It was
Yes.
really, and I understand what you're going through because I know you're going through that exact thing.
I feel how helpless because there's no way around the end result. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah.
And it's just the thought process and everything that goes on in your mind. And I think also because we're older, right? So this is also a confrontation with our own mortality. And we both have daughters. And, how it's making me think about my daughters and how they're going to have to manage this and what are the things that I could put in place to make it easier for them. And I think you're never really prepared for this. And it's just a natural part of life, right? We have to go through it. But somehow I thought, oh, I have so much more time, or you want more time. And then it's
Time.
just like this and it's over. So there's these flashes of like an entire lifetime that just feels like it was just so quick. And there's nothing, there's nothing you could do. I feel I'm angry, one, about cancer. I'm angry about because this isn't even about the cancer. You talked about being ill-equipped. There's nothing I can do. We're stuck in a system and a situation that you can't even make sense out of some of the things that are happening, and you can't do anything about it. I can't. I'm doing the research as fast as I can about finding out some things. Boy, am I getting an education about even how to get her out of this hospital because it's so tiny, and trying to get her to a hospital with better resources, and having other hospitals just decline her because they're short staffed. They don't have any beds. And it's just a really crappy system that you can't get somebody to get the help they need because of the bureaucracy. And mom says, why is this happening to me? And so then my heart breaks, right? Because you look for this philosophical, spiritual answer, and she spent her life ingraining spirituality and religion into us as kids, and you have to coach her back into leaning on her faith.
Right.
And there are no answers. It's like, why does this stuff happen? It's just really shitty. I'm like, I want her to be able to go on her terms, not on bureaucracy or things that you have no control over. I want it to be her way, her decision, her life. And I'm sure, you felt the same.
Yeah. No, I totally relate to what you're saying. It's so true that what you're saying about, having to educate yourself and having to manage all these moving parts while you're going through this trauma, right? Like this is a trauma for you and your family. And that's what I felt at the time. It was like I was, it was such an interesting thing to balance, because I'm trying to, take care of my kids, take care of my aunt, take care of my mom, and deal with, the hospice, the doctors, the hospitals, ordering things, getting things delivered, all those moving parts of what had to happen and the coordination. And it's overwhelming, because you have no choice because of the situation but to do that. There is no choice. You just have to do it. But you're in this terrible emotional state from this situation, right? You're having your own personal grief and reaction. And, you almost have to kind of put that aside or cope with that in your own way so that you can do all these other things. So it's very difficult. And I think that as, if you're the primary person in your family doing that, it becomes more difficult because you're trying to be the one, you're the point person, and I think that was a big realization I had during that whole thing was my mom had always been kind of that matriarch, that, leader of the family, right? She was always there. She was a stable person and always there. And then you realize she won't be, and that I move up into that position.
Wow.
And that's a whole another conversation. I mean, just now I'm that person, that responsibility falls on me. And that was a big change in my life when I thought that, that really was something impactful and important. So it's this whole passing of one generation to the next.
Yes.
And the lineage and all of that. And that was a big part of it as well, that there's no longer anybody above me, right? Like I'm the top of the food chain now in my family, as far as that goes, pretty much. And it was, that, like you're saying, that's an eye opener from my own personal point of view, right? Like my own journey, like where I am now and what that means to me personally, and to, my relationship with my kids, and my family. So there's so much involved in it.
There's so much. You know, my my dad died in 2011, so it's been a while now that my mom's been alone, and
Mm-hmm.
so I've been single the last 4 years. So we have become best buds. Like we're best friends. We hang out together. When we go on vacations to visit family members, we dress the same. I mean, we are playful together. She's my biggest cheerleader, and
Yeah.
talk to her every day. And all of my heartaches and complaints, she doesn't get tired of hearing them. And so thinking that I, first of all, don't even want to burden her with any of those things anymore. They seem so insignificant at this point. But I'm so afraid of losing that. She's afraid for me. She's like, I don't want to
Yeah.
leave you alone. She's still a mom trying to be a
Yeah.
mom. And I
Yeah.
like, that's the hardest thing for me. So I know with you, taking care and living with your mom for years too, like they become your person.
Oh, exactly. She was we're so similar. She was my best bud. Exactly what you said. I lived with her. We did everything together. We traveled together, and she was my person, truly. And when, she passed, it was like I lost my person. I lost, like you're saying, I lost that person that, I would have those conversations with every day, like now I live alone and it's a whole different thing, my days are different, you lose that person that you can talk to. And like you said, she was my biggest cheerleader. And to lose that as well, the person that was proudest of you and she wanted to take care of you. And you're right too. Like even at the end, she was worried about me and worried about everybody else. And I had to kind of reassure her, like step into that role and say, okay, it's okay. I will take care of everybody, or it's going to be okay. And that's hard. That was really hard, you know.
So hard.
To,
It's October, which has been become known as with through the pink ribbon, Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And I feel like it's all cancer awareness month at this point, especially for women who are so in tune with all this. I talk about in my cause marketing talks about the fact that one woman every 12 minutes in the United States dies of breast cancer. I think it's an extraordinary number, and that's way too high in too short a time. Every 12 minutes, a woman dies of breast cancer. It's just horrific. And over 20,000 cases a year of ovarian cancer, which is typically caught very late stage because, right, these are internal organs that nobody really is testing for until there's such a suspicion of pain. You don't feel it inside until it's just so
yeah,
late. And even with my mom, it was just found on a random test. She was just happened to be going for her annual blood work and
mm,
her blood was elevated. So they did a scan and that's when they found it. If she had canceled her appointment or not even gone, she would not be here today because she had no pain, no symptoms at all. So this
yeah,
has just happened so quickly. Our life went
yeah,
from planning Christmas vacation to
yeah,
planning hospice.
yeah.
And even now, just getting her out of here and trying to find the resources for hospice, I learned today from the transportation company who's been really helpful in educating us. They do transport to transport only from one state to another. That's what their licenses are and how they work. But they've had years and years of experience. So they've been giving me guidelines as far as trying to get her a hospital bed transfer by car or a helicopter transfer. And they told me that based on the laws and the rules and the regulations, here's what we're not going to tell you, but here's
Mm,
reading between the lines. But even if I have to sign my mom out AMA against medical advice, that if I could get the doctors here to work with me to just at least say that we're going home, having a plan, and then en route, all of a sudden, we suspect that she's being challenged, then I could direct them to say, bring us to the nearest emergency room and, have that planned out because they
mm,
can't. They can't do anything. So you have to like read around the system, think through the system.
mm.
And if you sign out against medical advice and then something happens, then you have even the insurances that will try to kick in and say that they don't want to pay. So it's like you need
Mm.
some kind of plan to get her well enough to get out so that we could move to a better location, get her the resources that she needs. So I am so hopeful that she can be strong enough. She keeps saying, I want to get out of here. I want to get out of here. Um, Even if it's strong enough to say that we're going to a nursing home and we've got a plan, but en route, the whole plan changes to get her to be able to get her home to another state where she was going to be living with me anyway. It's all crazy that you have to play these games instead of just
Yeah.
doing what's the right thing for the patient. It just stinks.
It does stink, I don't get me even started. I mean, my story, I'm still angry about New York. I'm still angry that, we had to move to Florida to catch this. She had something very aggressive and very advanced, and the doctors were quite shocked at what they found that, they said that obviously that had been there a very long time. She was under medical care in New York. And they should have found that, and I think, who wasn't doing their job well, like you're supposed to trust these doctors. And I know she had been going because she had had some, like urinary tract infections and bladder infections consistently, like probably over the year, and they kept telling her, oh, and giving her a different medicine. And, I don't think they took it seriously. Obviously they didn't, they didn't investigate further or they would have found it, so it's a
Yes.
frustration because you do trust the medical, you want to trust the doctors, you want to, have faith. And you try to do your own due diligence, and you try to educate yourself, and then these things still happen, and it's just amazingly frustrating because
Yes.
you try to do the best that you can, and then you're left in these situations where it's even more difficult to manage, what's happening.
And these, let's be like,
Yeah.
these are not state issues. These are doctor issues, right? So it's like in
Hmm.
both of our cases, a new set of eyes looked at something completely differently and
Right.
was able to diagnose differently and then, do their best to manage a crisis. I mean, and that's the
Right.
same thing that happened. My mom was complaining for over 2 weeks. I was complaining. My
Yeah.
sister was complaining. We were FaceTiming with the nurse saying, my mom is in so much pain. She's in so much pain. And they kept just, dismissing it. It
Mm.
wasn't until she's coming in by an ambulance saying, I'm in so much pain, that right away, this new doctor just said, hey, let's check this.
Yeah.
Instantly, they discovered what it was, and it was too late. So it shouldn't have to be that way. If they're too busy to take your complaint seriously, like there has to be a better way.
I agree. I agree. And I think it's harder, this may be I'm sure this is a generalization, but I think with elderly
Mm.
patients, I'm not sure they pay as close attention, even, you know, for whatever reason. I get the feeling, maybe in my mom's case, particularly, that, they just aren't as quick to look for some other reason. They're a little bit more, I think in her case, they just kind of, yesed her to death, and, oh yeah, it's this infection, and just change the medicine. And I know she wasn't happy, and I know she complained, and she was like, this doctor, I'm not happy with him. I'm going to see the PA next time. And she saw the PA, and, she was a little happier with the woman, obviously, though they weren't getting to the real true reason. And then when she came to Florida, it was a different story. But again, it's, again, in general, I mean, these doctors have to just listen to the patients. They're telling you what's wrong. They're telling you, that you need to do something else, and they're not, they need to listen. Yeah, it's
It's almost
heartbreaking.
like we need to have some kind of support groups for the elderly, including, I mean, we went through periods of time where the long term care facilities were being constantly in the news for their abuse, right? And it
Right.
became a known thing that the elderly were being mistreated and just directly abused. And then what happened to that? It all quieted down a little bit.
Yeah.
You would think that they would step up the care, but no, they didn't, because here it is still happening, and it shouldn't be happening. So it's making me feel that I know where my mom was, there was definitely not a support group or anybody who reached out. I mean, we were begging to be contacted and we couldn't get contacted.
Right.
So there has to be more eyeballs on everything, more people watching and in their face to avoid some of this happening.
Yeah.
And they don't want it. I mean, they were saying no cameras, no cameras. A couple of times I got asked,
Hmm.
are you recording? And I was like, no, I'm FaceTiming. But here I am recording. But I had to
Exactly.
come down to the cafeteria and I was still waiting for
Yeah.
somebody to throw me out. They don't, and I'm like, why? There should be a camera in every room.
Right.
If they're doing everything right, what does it matter
Yeah.
if they have a camera?
Yeah.
There should be the ability to have a camera in every room. It just makes sense. I don't
Exactly.
understand.
I know. Well, what are they, what are you trying to hide? Exactly. That's the first thing that comes to mind when somebody's like, well, don't video, all right, well, why? What are you trying to hide? I agree, and it's hard, when you're in when emergencies happen, there's a lot of emotion. You're trying to make smart decisions in a non-optimal situation. That's what I felt like, constantly
Mhm.
with my mom, as we went through it, get the surgery, take her to specialists, trying to help her make decisions, um, and make the decisions for her when necessary, and trying to do it to the best of my ability. I remember thinking that, consciously thinking, like, okay, look at, am I making the best decision here? Am I looking at all the options? And it was exhausting, because you have to do things quickly, in those situations, right? Decisions have to be made quickly. But again, it's this emotional, horrible trauma that you're going through, and you're trying to do it well. You're trying to make these choices that are going to be the best thing for her. And I remember thinking that, consciously thinking that. I was always going through that, think about it, like, okay, look at it from all the sides and try to not make an emotional decision, step back a minute and make the best decision you can. And that's so hard to do when people, are in those positions where, you've got family around and you've got sometimes competing opinions and you've got, this person you love that is going through this horrible situation, and you're trying to manage all of those things. Plus, manage yourself, right? And be a stable person for all those other people. That, like I said before, there's a lot of moving parts and it's more complicated than it seems.
And there's
sure.
no education. Like, we were
No.
just thrust into this, right? So how do we find those, if those resources existed where I could have
Right.
been educated and trained for elder care and prepared for,
Right.
okay, this is what happens as your mom and your dad start to age, and these are the
Yeah.
things that you have to prepare for, an emotional support group. Like, I wish I have had like the craziest education in the last 2 weeks. I
Yeah.
wish I could have had all this already discussed, uh, cherish. It's one thing to do estate planning and you start to do financial planning for that transition, but there's no emotional planning. There's no,
Right.
at least be exposed to these stories so that it's not a far shock for your system. I mean, I'm running on adrenaline. Last night was the first night I slept 6 hours, which was a big
Wow.
deal because it's been like 4 hours, right? You're
Yeah.
just so, it's just crazy. I'm just overstimulated and on fire. And I'm thinking, okay, why didn't anybody tell me this? Why didn't I know this, and this? So there's got to be a way to set up some kinds of support groups, resources,
Yeah.
geriatric training. I mean, unless you're in the field, where you're not educated on these things.
Yeah. And that's true. I mean, after this happened with my mom, I know I talked to you. I try to talk to my friends about it. And it seems to kind of be that thing, like a grassroots effort, among friends or family, that you communicate and you share experiences. It's not some formal thing, right? Because you're right, there isn't a formal thing. So it ends up being just word of mouth and maybe learning something from somebody else's experience that you knew or that told you something. Because it's learning like that boots on the ground, learning as you go kind of thing. But everything happens so fast. Like you said, it's a terrible situation to be making such important decisions in. And like, lack of sleep plays a big part, because that happened here. We cared for my mom at home 24/7. Somebody always had to be with her. So we rotated and we were exhausted. And, I'm not great when I'm tired, and I'm trying to, you're just running on adrenaline, as you said. So,
Yeah. I don't want to, I'm angry that, I mean, why, if I could do something to help other women, right? Now we have to think about this, because I had to learn about hospice on the fly. You as well.
Yeah.
I had to learn about how do I get interstate transfers
Yeah.
on the fly. I had to learn about hospitalization, internist to internist, and hospitalist to hospitalist, and how transfers work, and all. Like,
Yeah.
if we just had some easy peasy, broad generalization education, it would be better than having all this thrown at you once and you're trying to figure out these systems. And you get conflicting information from one person to the next, from one doctor to the next.
Yeah.
And then most of them are saying, oh, that's not my specialty. I don't know how that works. So you're having just to Google and research just to find out who to go to find out how do you get the help and the
Right.
education. It makes no sense.
No, I
No
know.
sense.
And yeah, there should be a better way. It's just so difficult, like I said. And it took so long to kind of recover from it as well. Like, after my mom even passed away, we went through so much and our family was just exhausted by the end of that, because it was a traumatic 2 months. And at the end of that journey, a whole nother journey begins, right? Like, estate stuff, and just besides all the logistics of that, like the legalities and the estate and all of that, which I was responsible for. Like, as we said before, I lost my person. So it was the adjustment of being alone and of stepping into that new role and all of that. So this last year, has been a challenge, because after the person passes, it doesn't suddenly, become okay. It's not okay, right?
Right.
Things are not okay. They weren't okay last year. I had to relearn and change my life, do things differently, create my life in a different way. And then just handle lots of, as you know, I had quite a bit of just legal challenges, estate challenges to handle as well.
Yeah.
So, you're grieving. And then I had to still go through all these other things. Like you're saying, it's kind of that journey kept going because I kept having to educate myself on all these legalities and all these financial things. And, that was almost worse in a way because that was like
Yes.
exhausting. And it caused a lot of anxiety until it was straightened out. And,
Absolutely. And you're
you
having to
know, it,
make those decisions at a
right,
critical time, right? We've got a
right,
continually aging population.
right.
And both of us are, not ignorant people. We're
No.
extremely well educated. My background is in finance.
Yeah.
And I am still, even through doing estate planning for clients for over for 30 plus years now, I was still last minute thinking, okay, if this is going to happen so quickly, what's the best thing? Should I be doing this with the house? Should I be doing this with the
Right.
savings? I should have done this. I should have done that. And I've done all the right things. So now my brain is just second guessing me, you
Yeah.
know? And but still it's so emotional and overwhelming, and you do feel this scarcity of time, and it just starts to choke you for making all these decisions. And then at some point I have just surrendered. So every day when I leave the hospital, I do this for
Yeah.
me, and I'm like, it's out of my hands, like, because you have no control,
No. No. I
and you
mean, you
have to
try, but
surrender into it.
yeah, you do. And it's true. Yeah, it's just, it can be so overwhelming. And like you said, I think we're capable people, for sure. And it is still overwhelming. No matter how smart you are, capable, or you will be overwhelmed by this process. And that's not a failure on your part. It's just because it is overwhelming. That's just the truth of it. I think it can crush a lot of people. A lot of people come out of this and they don't come out well because it's such a soul crushing experience, in so many ways. So I think that to be able to come out of this and survive and get on the other side and
Yeah.
be okay with it is hard, and I came out of it, like you said, went through a lot of things, and it did spur me on to actually go and create my own estate and last year, I very particularly went and set up my own stuff so that my children specifically wouldn't have to go through what I went through. And they were part of this process with their grandmother, and they were
Yes.
greatly affected by it because they were so close to her. And they learned a lot as people. And I'm glad we did go through it as a family because we came through. And I have to say, the benefit of it, as heart wrenching as it was, it did bring us closer as a family. And now we're super close. They're very close to my aunt, who's my mother's sister. And that was a great thing to see. Even between my two kids, I have a son and a daughter, and they bonded even between them greatly last year and came out of it even closer than ever. So as tragic an experience as it's been, I've been really happy to see that those things came out as a positive,
You're absolutely right. I was I've been doing automatic writing now for over 3 decades. So I have volumes of legal pads of all the automatic writing that I do through channeling my guides. And the first thing I went to in doing my writing through all this, because I felt so alone, and it was like, what did I miss? And I'm like begging for some kind of guidance. And my mom was leaning into me saying, why did this happen to me? So I literally asked my guides, and I was like, why is this happening? And the response I got as my hand started to write in the cursive was to allow you to become the people that you're big enough to be. Like,
yeah,
you're moving into a space of such bigness and love and compassion that you don't even know you have the capacity to endure, right? And then
mm,
all of a sudden, here it is. Like, an experience of love that is so deep and so overwhelming and so big that I'm definitely a better person for having had the ability to experience that. And the same
wow,
for my mom. And so when I shared that with her, and I said, Mom, I asked my guides and my angels last night in my writing, and what I got
mm,
is to allow us to be as big as we could possibly be. And all
Mm.
we really truly are is love. So, this space of love right now, that even when I couldn't communicate, I mean, a few days ago, my mother could only look at me with her eyes and she was just staring off. And I was like, I wish I could understand what she was saying and what she was thinking. And in her jokingness, as she came out of this, she said, I hope I won't remember this. I forget everything else. I hope I forget
Mm.
this too. I said, I hope you do too, Mom, but I don't think we're going to forget it for a long time. And
Yeah.
so that's the only thing I can think of, is that some way, we're here in life to learn, to be on this journey, to go through these unconditional love stories and unconditional possibilities that take these twists and these turns that we could never really predict or experience. And if you could learn to surrender into the journey. Well, it's not if you can learn. I mean, sooner or later, you're forced into beaten down by life enough to recognize that there's nothing you can do. And coming as a person who likes to be in control, I'm not a control freak, but I like to get things done, as I know you do.
Yep.
And so I take matters into my own hand. I don't sit there. I'm not a victim. I'm always in active mode. And this is the most passive that I've ever had to be in my life, because there was nothing I could do. And it was tearing me up. And it's still tearing me up. But I've had to make peace with whatever this is going to be and
Yeah.
however it's going to be. And so I'm literally living in the moment. This is literally a moment by moment thing over the last 2 weeks. And we're both running businesses, right? We had a balance juggling running our businesses and then taking care of this. I am now at the point where I'm like, it's all secondary. Nothing matters, right? So my viewpoint is hugely changed. Uh, I I moved into a new realm. I'm definitely in a new dimension now. So I'm not even sure how I'm going to feel about anything a couple of weeks from now, because right now my head is so freaking blown.
Yeah.
I can't even pull it together yet.
And that's part of it. That's part of, the journey. I think it's exactly what you said. We rise to the occasion. You have no choice. You're thrown into something and you need to handle it, and you need to do it. And you need to do it, you know, you find ways, I don't know, you become that person and you just do it. And I think the one thing I feel good about when I look back is that I was able to spend the time with my mom. And I'm glad
Mhm.
you're doing that, because that was the big blessing in all of it. It was that we were together, and that I was able to keep, the family took care of her. We were all together, and we gave her that time. And that it wasn't enough, of course, it never is, but we were there and we did the best we could. And I felt good about that, in the end. Like, after everything was said and done, I felt like a piece that, we tried to give back to her, and be there with her. And, that was kind of a blessing, I think, in the end,
Yes.
so,
And it has to
you,
come full circle, right?
yeah.
So it's like I said to Mom too, I said, okay, you were an infant child once that was so dependent on your mom. And then you
Mhm,
grew and you gave life and birth to us. And you've been taking care of us all these years. And
exactly.
now it's turned back around again, where it's my turn to take care of you, and trying to make her understand that it's not a burden, as you said, that it's almost
Right.
this privilege. Like,
Yeah.
it feels like such a privilege to be
Yeah.
able to take care of my mom. And I didn't really get that chance with my dad because he passed instantaneously.
Yeah.
And you, of course, you love and you take care of no matter what. But this whole dynamic, because it's like the two mothers and daughters, it's like this
Yeah.
whole dynamic together through this transition. But no one in this hospital has even come up to say, oh, is there an ombudsperson? Is there social services? Is there a case manager? Is there a worker? Nothing. Like,
Mm.
there's no services. And if there
Oh,
are, they haven't been offered. So I'm going to hope that this becomes something learning. We can talk about this with Skirt and Skirt Sisters and
yeah.
Skirt Smarts and being smart about making these financial decisions. It's certainly going to change my conversations and the talks that I'm having, and making sure that women are educated about these particulars even more so than just from the financial perspective, which is what I've always focused on,
Yeah.
but really being there to have a support structure that on, speed dial, they can reach out to anybody and say, hey, it's me, I'm going through it now. And there's a group of women there to kick in and support and listen and handle okay, you call the hospice, you call the transportation
Yeah.
company, you call the bed. Like, we have to be able to kick into gear and support each other.
I think that's a great idea. Absolutely needed. And I think just having that community, because as you're going through that, it can be a lonely process, even with your family, around you when you're trying to make those decisions. Everybody's in need at that point. So to be able to have people that are external to that situation to help, I think is brilliant. So yeah,
Okay, you're
I
going to help me
wholeheartedly
with this,
agree.
right?
Yeah,
And
I will help
you're
you.
gonna help me with this.
Yeah, I will. No, it's a great idea. The more resources you have, as during this situation, the better. There's so many moving parts that are happening. So, women pulling together and that have answers and that can have been through it, that can help, is vital. I agree. It's a brilliant idea.
And so now we're gonna get ready to close here, but you are now carrying your mom and her spirit, and I'm sure it's reflected in your artwork, and you're seeing things differently and uniquely and with whole new perspective. You're a whole new person as well. And
Yes.
so I can't wait to see all of your artwork. I know I'm hitting you on creating an NFT so I can get some of your
Yes.
artwork on NFTs, and we can
We
get
have to
this
talk about that.
available
Yeah.
for everybody out there to be able to
Yeah.
share and enjoy your artwork, or commission you to do some
Yes.
pieces, which I would highly recommend. So we
Yeah.
will definitely share all of your contact information in the podcast so that
Awesome.
people can reach out and be able to view your artwork through your website. And then also, like I said, I will strongly recommend that people consider commissioning you for some pieces, because they are just absolutely beautiful and amazing. I think I could see something behind you in the background there.
Yeah, it's a blurry. It is mine but it's a blurred background, I guess, kind of. So you can't really see it, but you can see the colors. Those are the
I can
colors.
see all those amazing colors, and it looks like just a vibrant burst of.
I know.
Oh, I know. Again, just looking even at the blur, it's inspiring. I can feel it just from that. So, but all this is visible on your website, so we'll post all that. And then, we'll have some NFTs that are out there available for purchase. Also, to fund brain cancer awareness, we're actually working on that. And my NFTs all go through my platform, which is called Commit Good, so that we can raise awareness through selling NFTs and then take those funds to give them back to charity. So we're so excited about Commit Good and how it's going to change the blockchain and all kinds of fundraising for nonprofits. So
I love it.
Thank you so very much, Karen, for having this really tough talk with me. I appreciate you. I love you. And thanks for spending an hour with Pixie Paula on Spiritually Speaking, episode 16. And everybody will have to tune in next week to see what happens. I hope that they do.
Glutathione is a big word. It's the body's own master antioxidant. It's a scavenger for free radicals, bacteria, and viruses. There are no products in the market with the ingredient NASET. NASET increases the production of glutathione that's in our body already to strengthen and enhance our immune system, elevate sense of well-being, support muscle strength and endurance, cognitive function, and liver support. It helps with increased energy and blood sugar regulation. Get your bottle of GSH Plus from www.salvationnutra.com.